Welcome to Thriving in Our 40s. Now, before we have our conversation, I want to give a little bit of a side note to what this conversation is going to be about, because my previous listeners up until now would have been expecting transitions unscripted, which is conversations I've had in the past about life's unexpected twists and turns and how we've navigated our way through them. Today, however, we are talking about thriving in our 40s, which is conversations I have with experts about how we can navigate the changes we know are going to happen in our life, and getting expert advice about how we can face these with confidence, energy, and a sense of adventure. Welcome, Sue. You're my first guest on Thriving in Our 40s.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Well, it's so nice to meet you. We were introduced through a friend because you are, amongst other things, a personal trainer, and you specialise in women's health from midlife onwards. And I think that is such an important point to say, because fitness obviously impacts us all, but as we get to a different stage of life, we need more from our exercise and our fitness. So I can't wait to hear what you're going to be able to share with us about tips and tricks to train smarter, and whether that is leveling up our existing exercise routine or motivating us to actually start moving, because life can take over and fitness can take a back seat. So I'm sure what you're going to say is going to be so invaluable and very inspiring.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
No pressure.
Absolutely.
So we'll start, if we can. Can you give a bit of a brief background about yourself, Sue, and why you specialise in women's health in midlife and why that is so important?
Absolutely. I started, I suppose, my structured fitness journey when I turned 40. I had two children in my late 30s, and at 40 I was diagnosed with an underactive thyroid, and I was typical. Before that, I yo-yo dieted. I did everything, from going to Slim Fast to Slimming World. I tried it all. And what happened is I was introduced to strength training. I had a lot going on at the time. I'm 11 years cancer free this year, so quite a lot happened with me in that time as well, in my 40s. And I was also trying to work in quite a high pressure job and juggling young children, and also trying to fit myself in all of that as well. And I decided to leave my career behind after having cancer and set up as a personal trainer to help women, to give them really the benefit of hindsight, because I wanted to be able to help as many people as possible not sleepwalk into the same issues that I was going into that I went into myself. So I just decided to leave my career behind and set up a new business, which when I look back now was pretty brave in my early 40s.
With two young children and having gone through cancer, it's a lot to take on. It's a lot to take on. And you're absolutely right, just picking up on that hindsight, because there is so much information out there, Sue. And we don't really have an excuse that it's not out there, but it's knowing where to look, and it's knowing what's going to work for you and your lifestyle. And that is the tricky bit, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
So before we get on to the physical side of fitness and what it can do to our body, I want to just look a bit more internally at hormones. So I'm sure I speak on behalf of many people, 40s onwards, it's almost like being a teenager again. Your hormones are all over the place, they're up and they're down. So how does that hormone imbalance impact our metabolism, our muscle mass, and our energy levels?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are hormones. That's what we are. And I think when we were younger, people used to make joke about, oh, it's her hormones. And everything was down to our hormones. But having sort of studied this in a lot of depth in the last sort of 10 years, we are our hormones, but our hormones are very, very important. And I think understanding them is really key. It doesn't have to be complicated. It's just about understanding how we feel, and that's usually a really good sign as to what's going on underneath with our hormones. So as we go into, if we can say it, perimenopause, I think I probably started perimenopause at about 42. I didn't know I was in perimenopause. There was things that was happening to me now when I look back with the knowledge that were clear indicators it was perimenopause. But because there were lots of other things happening at the same time, what I try and say to clients is, we're a little bit like if you're baking a cake. So excuse the analogy, but a cake has to have the right ingredients in it for a start off, and the right amounts of each ingredient. So I'm not particularly a very good baker, but if I make cakes, I have to have everything completely right for the cake to rise, to be fluffy, to taste right, etc. And we are like a recipe for a cake. So quite often when one hormone goes off, it knocks all the rest of them out as well. So the
Yeah.
cake doesn't rise.
Yeah.
So what can happen when we go into perimenopause is the major thing that's happening, as well as other hormones as well, is our decline in our estrogen.
Okay.
And when that happens, that's when things start to change.
Okay.
And it can it can affect our metabolism, because the decrease of estrogen affects our insulin sensitivity. So that can change us on a metabolic basis. It
Is
can lead.
that why people feel that they're putting on weight during this period of their lives?
Absolutely. So what can happen is you don't necessarily need to have changed anything. You can just be carrying on the way you were before. But because of the background hormone profile changing, we can, say, for example, find that we're putting body fat on in different areas that we didn't have before. And I think it's really challenging for a woman to understand, well, why is that happening
Yeah.
now? And as we're going to talk about, what can we do about it?
And that we can't change what's going on internally, can we, though?
No.
And it obviously is going to impact how we feel about ourselves.
Yeah.
What about factors such as sleep and stress and mental well-being in general?
Yeah.
How does
Yeah.
that impact our physical health? And what do you recommend in terms of a holistic approach
Yeah.
about coming to terms with that and then doing something about it as well?
Yeah, yeah. And I think this is one thing I've been really passionate about, because when I set up, I wanted to be, and I don't mean this in a bad way, I wanted to be more than a personal trainer, because what we have to look after, and this is something that I encourage, is our physical, mental, and emotional well-being. And that is everything. So when we're stressed, our body takes us into fight and flight, whether we know it or not. And when we're not stressed, we're over in rest and repair.
Okay.
So what can happen is your body, if you imagine, it's like it's trying to find balance all the time. So it wants homeostasis. That is that middle point when everything feels absolutely fantastic. But quite often, getting homeostasis is pretty difficult.
I was going to
You've
say,
got
when does that happen?
you've got external stresses that are pushing you into fight and flight. You might have had a bad night's sleep because the kids were up, or work pressures, or relationship issues, and that's pushing you all the way over here. So then we think, right, I'm going to do some yoga, I'm going to do some meditation, and I'm pushing myself back over here. But quite often what's happening with a lot of ladies in their midlife, because they're trying to do too much, they don't even get into rest and repair.
Okay.
They're
Okay.
too far over here. And I think society is creating this expectation that we have to be super women. And even if we think we're in rest and repair, it's not doing enough.
It's very hard, isn't it, Sue? Because I think you're right. Society does put that pressure on, but I can probably maybe speak more from experience than anything, is you put that pressure
Yeah,
on yourself as well.
100%.
You're looking externally and you're seeing
Yeah,
what other people are doing, and you're like, well, I can do that. And I can do it
yeah,
without complaining or losing sleep or getting stressed about it. And
yeah,
that isn't the reality. And so we've got all these things going on inside us. Our hormones, like
yeah,
you say, we're made up of hormones. We can't control them. So how can we use our physical fitness to help manage them, but also to start feeling good about ourselves? Because I think it's that cycle, isn't it? Once you start to feel good
yeah,
about yourselves, it's going to kick off the next step and the next step. So I know fitness is a big topic. So maybe let's narrow down with strength training first.
Yeah.
You mentioned
Okay.
that, and on your in your in your research, in your practice, you say how crucial it is for strength
Yeah.
training.
Yeah.
Why is it so crucial to women in our 40s and beyond?
Okay. Everybody can do it. I think that's the
Okay.
one thing.
Okay.
So I love the fact that every woman can strength train. You don't have had to have been a gymnast. You don't have to be a runner. Everybody can strength train. And I think that's one thing. So it's accessible. So
Mhm.
we can all do it. And there's no reason why not to do it. That is the two really important things. There's been a study, it's a few years old, but I think it's 28% of women 50 plus in the UK have currently got osteoporosis.
Which is thinning of the bones, is that right?
It is,
Yeah,
that's right. So as we
28.
age, the estrogen that we have that declines in our bodies creates potentially bone density issues.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why absolutely 100% of people should be strength training.
Just
And
can
I
I
think this,
just sorry, so just so that I just want to back to what you said earlier then about hormones. So this is what's going
yeah,
on in our 40s. So
yeah,
we're losing that estrogen, yes.
absolutely.
So strength training is going to help protect our bones.
What
Okay.
it's going to do is the levers that you put against your body with strength training, the science that's behind it, encourages stronger bones.
Strong. Okay, fabulous. Okay.
So that's what's really important. So it's about maintaining your skeletal mass in your body, and that's what strength training can do.
And anyone can do it as well. So how do you
Yeah,
start? How do you start if you haven't lifted up a weight in a very long
yeah.
time or ever?
Hmm.
How do you start with that initial practice?
I think there's so much available online, and
Okay.
I'm a big advocate for having a go at things.
Yeah.
The key thing that I think people need to do is if they're not lifting particularly heavy, have a go at things, but don't follow anything that's too fast. You can do strength training really slowly, and it can be pretty boring because the lifts that you do can be very repetitive, and there isn't millions and millions of lifts that we need to do. There's just some basic lifts, and just learn how to do them properly.
Okay.
I personally started my strength journey it's before I was a PT. I worked with a PT, and he introduced me to strength training.
Okay.
And what I've done since then is obviously the ethos is to do things correctly. So join a small group, whether it's a small group that's available to you, or find a good online program where you can watch and do it with that person online, but nice and slowly. The lifts that you want to be concentrating, it's not complicated. You want to be doing a squat, you want to be doing a deadlift, you want to do some pushing, whether that's a chest for pushing weights away from your
Hmm.
body or above your head,
Yeah.
and you want to be doing some pulling with the weight. That is as basic as it can be, and
And so
mastering those basic lifts.
and how long should an exercise routine last? Because going back to what I was saying at the introduction, time is precious, isn't it?
Yeah,
And even trying
absolutely.
to get 10, 15 minutes in for
Hmm.
yourself is hard to navigate. So I suppose my question is twofold. How long should you spend weight training? And I've heard conflicting advice is, start with the heaviest and do the absolute heaviest you can, or do lighter and do more of it. So what would you recommend in terms of repetition as
Yeah.
well?
Okay. Strength training is all about science. So you tend to work in a certain repetition range. So if I'm doing a basic progressive strength training program for a client, I will get them to work between an 8 and a 12 rep range because that builds endurance and strength.
Okay.
And what for women it does as well, it gives you that nice tone rather than getting if you're in a really high rep range, it tends to build more endurance in the muscles. So there's pros and cons for each.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I tend to like to work in the 8 to 12 rep range for clients. Heavy is okay if the form is there.
Okay.
So if I was going to do a squat, and I was lifting really heavy and I was doing 12 reps, but my knees are turning in and I'm struggling, it's not necessarily the right thing. So it's about doing the lift properly. Basically, groundworks, doing release work first before you lift a weight. And then when you're lifting it, it's slow and it's methodical. The time under tension is what creates the muscle protein synthesis. So if you're going really fast, that's not going to be necessarily as good as doing it really slowly, because that muscle is under tension for longer. What I sort of say to people, if you're happy with your technique, the last 2 of the repetitions should be a struggle. So if I'm doing 10 of something, 10 squats, and I've got 2 dumbbells in my hands, and I'm getting to 8 repetitions, that last 2 should feel difficult.
Okay, that is fascinating, because I think it's my mentality anyway to do things quickly, just to get things done. So to do 10 quick reps, I'm like done. But actually, what you're saying is slow down and really concentrate on the form and the use of that muscle. And I was watching a YouTube video the other day, and the person was talking about mind muscle connection. And if you really think about that muscle
Absolutely.
and using it, the power of the mind with that muscle, it's a good partnership.
Absolutely. And bearing in mind that we're all in fight and flight all the time, the majority of people are, and we're trying to get people over into rest and repair. Why would we want to do strength training in a really erratic way? Surely it would be better to do it really slowly and methodically. And that's going to be much better for our just for our overall well-being.
It's almost
And
a bit more mindful, isn't it, as well?
absolutely, very therapeutic. Yeah, definitely.
And how often should you be doing strength training on a weekly basis?
Yeah, I mean, it's like going back to everybody's an individual. So if I said to you now, the perfect amount of times is 3 times a week, but then that person says, well, I haven't got 3 times a week, so I'm not going to be able to do it. It's about people making small changes. So if they're not strength training at all at the moment, to do 3 times probably wouldn't be achievable. So what we would do is we'd start with doing it once. Let's do it once a week, and let's see how it goes. And then maybe try for twice a week. And it's about putting in small changes to make things achievable. Because unfortunately, life carries on the way it is. And unless you're going to outsource something to give you more time to do it, it has to fit in. So it's about making sure that it's right for that individual as well.
Absolutely. So say that we've started our training and we're doing it once, twice, 3 times a week, but we're not seeing the results. Now, I think it is easy to give up, to get frustrated, to get complacent about it. So what are the common mistakes that women make at our age about exercise? And are there ways that we can overcome this as well?
Yeah. I think it's sort of getting into the arena now, and it's not just about the exercise. It's about everything. So if you're not necessarily eating the correct nutrition, you'll be slow to see results. If you're not trying to sort out your stress, you're going to be seeing slower results. Because remember, we're a bunch of hormones that need to be in balance. So quite often, if people are not seeing results, it's usually not just based on the strength training they're doing, but it's about everything. And that's why I think it's really important to look at everything holistically.
Absolutely.
So it might be, for example, that they're not getting enough protein in their diet, because we know we need protein and all the essential amino acids for muscle protein synthesis, which is just building of muscle. So just something like that, and looking at the nutrition can be something. It could be just that they are really stressed. So they've got too much cortisol going on. And, if they're doing that, and it's going to be really hard for their body to think, oh, right, okay, I know what you're doing here. You're trying to build muscle. It's likely to be, sort of sending mixed messages, really.
Absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right. It's a holistic approach. And I think for those of us who haven't maybe looked at our lifestyle in that way before, it's a really good
Mm,
place to start to make those small
yeah,
changes that will lead to the bigger impact. So
yeah,
maybe it's, I'm, I'm not speaking from experience, but going to bed earlier. It's changing your diet slightly, or
yeah,
just getting outside. If you make those little changes, it will start to have a bigger impact overall. And I do want to move on from fitness per se and talk a bit more about
yeah,
the work that you do, but um I want to just mention cardio as well, because
yeah,
I think
yeah.
up until the 40s, it is about the cardio. It's raising that heartbeat. And I've always been kind of the upbringing or the education, whether, through school, the more red-faced I am, the harder I've worked, and therefore the bigger impact. Does cardio still play a part in our fitness now?
Um, well, I don't do any.
Okay, that's interesting.
um,
Why not?
I do a little bit. I do enough to look after my cardiovascular fitness. But my days of running 10K, 5K, which I probably would have done earlier in my life, I don't need to do it. And to be honest, I don't really enjoy it. So I'm all for doing things I enjoy doing. What I tend to do with cardiovascular fitness is it's about if somebody enjoys it, okay, let's have a look at it and see if that's something that they want to do. But strength training can be done in a way that it's cardiovascular anyway. So you can actually change how you're using your weights to put some load on your cardiovascular system. So it's about understanding how you can train smartly as well.
Mm.
The one thing that we have to bear in mind is, and I know we'll come on to this holistic approach a little bit, if you are doing steady state cardio, which means that you can more or less do it for quite a long period of time because your heart rate's not too elevated. But then there's quite a lot of people that like to do HIIT training, which is really pushing up their heart
Mhm.
rate. I used to do, so just to give you an idea, I used to do 4 HIIT classes a week, and that was about 7 years ago. And then I
Okay.
started understanding the science behind HIIT training, and I did more qualifications that then started to make me question whether or not I should be putting on a HIIT class for women in their 40s and 50s. And a bit of HIIT is good, but we have to be careful how we introduce it, because
Mhm.
let's say you're a woman, you're quite stressed at the moment, you know that, and then what we're going to do is we're going to throw in a bit of HIIT training as well, which is going to fire up your cortisone even more.
Mhm.
So it's really important, and I know we'll probably come on to this. It's about the woman understanding herself a little bit more
Mhm.
and what she needs to bring into her lifestyle, for it to match and echo what the body and the mind needs,
Yeah.
rather than the pressure of what society's telling us that we should be
Yeah.
doing.
And that in itself can be tricky, isn't it? Because
Yeah,
you're looking at maybe other people's results that aren't going to necessarily
yeah,
work for you.
yeah, absolutely. And I think we are very much influenced by what other people are doing.
Hmm.
And I think what I try and say to ladies when I'm training and coaching them is the answers are normally inside us. We know what we need to do,
Hmm.
but what we need to do is clear away the clutter so we can understand what that might be, and know how the fact that we have to evolve. And I think being in your 40s is a really platform for change for women. And some of them are having children later. So, like me, I mean, I was 35 when I had my first child. So in my early 40s, I had young children as well,
Hmm.
as my hormones were changing. And I think it's about us understanding what we need. And
Hmm.
I think what I tend to try and do as a wellness coach is help them understand what they need, and um, get them to look within
Yeah.
really a little bit more. Um, Yeah, I'm probably waffling a little bit now.
No, no, that's
Ask me
that's
another one.
fascinating. No, I'm lost in your words because you're absolutely right, and it's I'm I'm the first to criticize myself. Slowing down, isn't it? Slowing
Yeah.
down
It.
and
Mhm.
what works for you. Um,
Yeah.
I want to just move on now, and I know this is a vast topic because we were in contact about this before we started
Yeah.
recording. Fasting.
Mhm.
Now I know you do a
Yeah.
whole course on this, but I don't think we cannot mention it in the terms of physical health
Absolutely.
and 40s.
Yeah.
So I would love your opinion because there's, I think, conflicting opinion out there. We should be doing it, but also women of a certain age, i.e. our age, shouldn't be doing it. So if you could give a top line do's and don'ts for
Yeah.
fasting, that would be really
Yeah.
valuable.
Okay. So this is something that we've been doing in the studio a little bit recently, and there's been some ladies that I've been coaching in their 40s that we've had a look at this science. And the I'm all for doing things that's right. So if somebody comes to me and says, I want to try this, right, okay, let's have a chat about it and let's see what that means for you. And we've had some really good results.
Hmm.
But the caveat is it's not just been the fasting. So fasting, I believe, and I've been listening to all the science as well. And there's obviously Dr. Mindy Peltz has been big and instrumental in all this, and she is definitely the expert. And it's worthwhile anybody who's interested in it to watch maybe some of her YouTube videos because there's
Okay.
some really good ones out there, and they're short and sharp to the point. Um, I think fasting has its place, definitely. But if a woman is still having her cycle, which the majority probably are in their 40s, I know some of them aren't, and that's okay completely. But if you're having a cycle, fasting has to work with the right nutrition and also with the right training, depending on where you are in your cycle. And I think that's really, really important because fasting, as long as you do it in the right days of your
Hmm.
cycle, can be very, very beneficial.
In what
Um,
way can it be beneficial, Sue?
it's all about once you hit 13 hours of fasting, your body starts going through changes. So,
Okay.
just really without bringing it all complicated, it starts clearing you out, basically.
Okay.
So, we know we're made up of cells. That's what we are. We're just millions and trillions of cells. So, what fasting does, your cells are carrying your past life, basically. So everything that we've done to our body to this point is in our cells. And what fasting can do is it gives it a really good spring clean
Hmm.
and it clears the cells out. Now you have to do it for a minimum of 13 hours, but you can go as far as 3 days. Now that's quite a lot, and that's not necessarily achievable for everybody. So I think what's really important with fasting is you get yourself informed about it.
Hmm.
Don't do it because the person you had a coffee with last week's doing it, because it might not be right for you.
Number
And then
one, yes.
if it's right, get yourself informed about it and then look at what you need to do to start introducing it and seeing how you go. But I do think getting some advice about it before you start is a good idea. Some people are in their 40s, don't know what their cycle is. It might be that they're on the coil or they're on birth control, so they
Mm.
don't know when their cycle is happening. And that can make it quite complicated. And it's not that you shouldn't do it, it's just that you need to understand, well, where am I in my cycle then?
Hmm.
And again, how are you going to know that if you're a bit cluttered up and you don't really know what's going on? And it's about bringing things back again, slowing down, and just really looking at what's right for you and that check-in with yourself, basically.
There is so much information, clearly, isn't there? And I
I
think this
think
is the,
it's massive.
yeah,
Fasting is
it
massive.
So I think I would love to pick up that conversation with you in another podcast, because I've got so many
Yeah,
questions about, well, how do you find out when your cycle is, and what exactly
yeah,
does fasting mean, and how long should we do
yeah,
it in each period? So there's so many other questions, but for the sake of today, thank you for
yeah,
giving that top line
yeah,
explanation. And yeah, we'll pick up that later on, because I'm sure there'll be lots of information and lots of people intrigued about what that topic. So I
yeah,
want to move on to what you do as well in terms of your midlife courses. You
yeah,
put together toolkit courses, and these are, from what I understand, sessions that you run that empower women on their journeys from perimenopause through to whenever.
yeah,
So
yeah.
if we were to do a simplified midlife toolkit, what three things would you involve, bearing in mind kind of what we've talked about today?
hmm hmm if somebody was going to bring in their own toolkit, the first thing that I would be getting them to do is every day in their toolkit, they sit down with themselves and they have a meeting. The most important meeting of the day is the one you're going to have with yourself. And it
Mm.
literally takes a minute. So your toolkit would be, I'm going to ask myself 3 questions. I'm going to ask myself, how am I feeling physically? How am I feeling mentally? And how am I feeling emotionally?
Yeah.
It's the best thing you can do.
Wow.
And quite often, when you do that and you get that quietness, even if it's just when you put your makeup on in the morning or
Mhm.
brushing your teeth, we all have a minute for ourselves. And what that tends to do is it spurs on actions. So for me, for example, I'd say to myself, right, how am I feeling physically? Okay, I'm a bit sort of tight this morning from strength training last night. I definitely didn't get enough water yesterday. And there's things like a shopping list that gets created. How
Mhm.
am I feeling mentally? Oh, I'm going on that podcast tomorrow. I'm going to have to get sorted out. I'm a bit nervous about it. So, things like that. And when we ask ourselves how we are physically and mentally, and it gives ourselves that little shopping list, we look after our emotional well-being. And it's absolutely brilliant. And it's something that I've done since my mentor discussed this with me about 7 years ago. Once we start doing that, what that toolkit will do, it will give you on that day your to-do list for yourself.
Interesting. Okay. Without telling yourself what to do, it will happen naturally.
Yeah, and it just becomes really good routine.
Mm. Yeah.
And we tend to find the emotional roller coaster that we go on sometimes isn't quite as bad because we've looked after our physical and mental health.
Okay.
And on the mental side of things, if we all have that mental to-do list, don't we? Oh, I must do that, I must do that, I must do that. And if it comes up 2 or 3 times in those meetings with yourself, just do it. Because
Yeah.
it's taken up so much room in your head that you're thinking about doing it. Well, just do it, and then you don't have to think about it again.
It's
And it
done.
just clears stuff out.
That
Absolutely.
that's fine. So that is something you recommend we do just once a day, like you say, a minute. Just
Yeah,
run through those three: mental, physical, and emotional. How are we feeling? And
yeah,
just to become more in tune with what's going
yeah,
on with us, opposed to kind of getting out of bed and dealing with whatever is confronted with us externally.
yeah, absolutely.
That's brilliant. I love that. I'm going to use that tomorrow, maybe even later today. I love it. Um, Sue, we're going to wrap up because
Yeah,
there is so much more information we can share. Um, but I don't want to overload people. This is the thing. And this is
absolutely.
this is what I want to do with these series, is keep them kind of shorter, where people can go away and do tools and use those actions today. So thank you so much for sharing all your insight. And there are definitely so many things that we can take away from what you said to make slow but powerful progress. And I think it's all about achieving, isn't it, that long-term health and
Yeah,
strength. It's not the
yeah.
short fix. It's how we feel
No,
internally
yeah,
and how that's going to be conveyed externally through the exercise that we do. Thank you
yeah.
so much. And just to finish up, Sue, where can we find out more about the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a website, Sue Parkyn Wellness. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook.
Mm, fabulous.
So yeah, there's loads of information on there. And yeah, just follow me, send me a like, or do whatever, and share this podcast. Let's try and help as many ladies in their 40s thrive.
Exactly. Thank you so much. And we will book in for another date to do the fasting conversation, because that is something that is going to appeal to many of us. So thank you.
Thank you.